Hi, everyone. Let's see. Okay, wow, you guys have been in the chat already. Thank you guys so much for tuning in live. I wanted to connect directly with you guys because we've gone over some heavy topics this past, like 3 months. And so I wanted to catch up with you guys because I see a lot of comments that build up and build up. And I'm like, all right, I think we have to directly just talk to each other because um, either a lot gets lost in translation, or sometimes when I clarify something, it brings more questions. And so, to be completely honest, the strongest way to learn is through a dialectic. That's how the Gnostic, that's how especially Hermetic teachings were taught. That's the best way to learn. It's through a dialectic, AKA a dialogue between teacher or student, always knowing that teachers are also students, but that's just the best way to learn. And so even though I'm already tuning into you guys when I have each video and I choose each topic, I'm already intuiting what that questions are, or what the overall way to kind of like narrate each video is, how to set it up and structure it based off of what I feel is the next intuitive best part of each topic to talk about. And yet still within all of that, it's still just better to directly connect with you guys because once again, that dialogue of back and forth, that dialect is the strongest, most robust way to learn. So I'm going to start taking questions. Let's see. You guys are so awakened that sometimes when I look at the questions, I'm like, I don't know if I could answer that. Okay, that girl Heyoka can, sorry, these are moving really quick. Can being too comfortable weaken spirituality? Yeah, being too comfortable can always, but then also what ends up happening is we can start romanticizing strife, romanticizing and developing an affinity with pain simply because, you know, it's a survival tactic at one point. So at one point, we were put in such painful situations for our own growth and for our own journey to set us up for that journey and for those overarching themes. But then we can get stuck inside developing an affinity and romanticizing pain. So yes, but also keep in mind that nuance of being able to understand that pain in this density. It's not always. See, within this universe, it is actually a part of the duality that's at play for our learning. So there is that natural principle that balances our movement forward or our evolution, AKA growth, with that balancing factor that catalyzes it, which would be, in this case, challenges, trials, and tribulations. But that doesn't always need to be the way, especially in once we go up in densities. But in this one particularly, that's the way. And so we have enough suffering until it catalyzes us into not needing such harsh catalysts in order to grow. I always tell people that eventually you will get to a point where you can learn what was once a very harsh, very brutal lesson by simply sitting in a field with a butterfly laying on your shoulder. So there's always that possibility. All right, fine, I'll take the bait. Astro Seed says, please teach me about the warfare between public institution and the awakening ones. So public institutions are going to represent indoctrination no matter what it is. So if there's something that needs to propel us into an awakening, that catalyzing force would be the dominant pools, P-O-O-L, pools that we get our information from. So you are only as good as the quality of the pools. That's why they call it mainstream, because it's a stream. They're all pools that we're getting information from. So public institutions represent the catalyzing force. They represent the mainstream pools of information that are used to act as an antithesis against awakening. They're used to indoctrinate us. And so how that applies to awakening is by being able to utilize what these systems have to give us. They all have gifts, but also when the time comes to be able to differentiate between what is absolute programming from these institutions that is being inserted in us, and then what is useful, because that's how I've grown. I don't know. I know this is kind of like a faux pas in the spiritual community, but I went to college and it made me better simply because I learned everything I needed to learn. And it was very easy to deprogram myself of all the things that was, needing to go. So it's one of those things where it also has a lot of fruits there. I learned logic there. Okay. Logic was taken away from our true systems like the trivium and the quadrivium, which we were supposed to be learning from. So it's because of college that greatly helped me. Alex says, opinion of the law of one. I like the law of one material because I don't, it's not my Bible. I recognize the shortcomings with the law of one. I have outgrown those teachings, but I still find them foundational. So inside my video, where do I get my information from? Because I get asked that a lot. I talk about how I'll use a teaching as a bridge. So I'm not against a lot of these different concepts that are going around. And I've learned so much from the law of one material. A lot of people bash that material because it's very wordy. I could go on about that, but I won't. It's the best for a social memory complex that was trying its hardest to be accurate and to serve in accuracy. And there's a huge gap in our understanding and our language with that social memory complex. So that's why it's so wordy. It's because they're not going to give you a dumb answer that's blunt when there's so much, like language is so limited in the ability to be able to syntax and restructure the way that we think to help us meet their vibration and where they're coming from to the best of our ability. So I like the law of one material. I feel like there's a lot of different ways that not the law of one itself, but that a lot of that information and that source in general is being now distorted and used. And I don't agree with that. And, but yeah, I will use teachings all the time that I have outgrown, and I have no venom against them. And I'll use them as a bridge to catch people up. So even though I have fallen out of resonance with so much of the knowledge I've learned, I still just ask myself always, is this useful? The Guyver. Sarah, one question. It is difficult for someone like me who has anger management, paranoia, to have a Kundalini awakening. Okay, so paranoia is a part of the journey. Sometimes people live in paranoia and they think that it's like a higher level of consciousness, they're superior, and it's just their arrogance and limitations. But that's not you. You're aware of the fact that you have these emotional, let's call them blocks, shall we say, towards an awakening. But not so. I have come from a past where anger was one of my strongest dominant temperaments, but that was only because I had the good decency to expect better from this reality. So that can also be a catalyzing force. There's a lot of beauty if you question where that anger is coming from. And what you'll typically see is that there's a lot of care. There's a lot of investment that's expressing itself maybe in an unhealthy way, but the more you get to know it and you become aware of it, you're able to transmute it and use it for a higher purpose. I don't think anyone in this chat would be surprised if I told you that I positively use my anger in a way for a stronger, clearer conduit of articulation. And so there's a lot of vital life force that can be harnessed and used in if a person is able to own it, embrace it, and yet exalt it in a way where it's showing you its highest gifts. So many questions. Okay. Sarah, what's up with your eye? What's up with my eye? Amy Harris, can you talk about the sacred secretion and the divine union within an individual? Yeah. So all of esoteric interpretations of any type, whether we want to look at it as revelations, which is rich with esoteric masculine feminine unity, or whatever it is that we resort to when it comes to spiritual authority text, sacred text, sacred secretion, they're all talking about masculine and feminine union. That's even what the 144 is about. It's talking about the different nadis or channels of subtle energy within us that then, once they unify, they amplify from 72 into 144. So everything basically, if you want a cheat sheet, and I don't recommend having a cheat sheet, but if you just want like a key, you know, like on a map, you see a key on the corner to kind of interpret the map. If you need a key, the key is always in esoterica, always masculine and feminine, union, harmonization, balance. Maggie Smith says, do you have any advice to contribute to those of us that don't understand the place we live? Do you mean geographically, regional, Earth? Could you clarify? Let's see. Luna, if we should be seeing the physical as a learning mirror, is tarot or divination practices wrong, or are they just another confirmation of energy? So tarot is, and other divination practices, that's kind of vague, and it does depend. But tarot in and of itself is a hermetic art. All of these are meant to understand either in archetypal structures such as tarot or archetypal structures, astrology, numerology. If it's a mirrored universe, which it is, then it's showing it through all these different hermetic arts, aka divinations. And so there's nothing inherently evil with that. And I know that it's one of those topics that you just don't want to paint black or white. I just don't want to say, oh, that came from the church. It came to scare people away from that, because also there's a lot of, even though that I don't find valid, and I find that a mechanism of control, intentionally put fear into divination. But also there's this more refined, more mature query about that. And I find that valid because people are wanting to know if these divination practices, and they're not coming from a religious standpoint at all, but they want to know if these practices are welded in a way that is going to either backfire on the query, on the truth seeker, or is being used against us. And I will tell you, and I think I've said this in other videos, that anything can and is being used against us. So if you look at an objective tool within the universe, whether it's divination or whether it's knowledge, whatever it is, it has a way to be harnessed in a positive way that brings self-awareness and therefore self-evolution, which is what the Hermetic arts are intended for. Or it has a way to be manipulated, distorted, and used against us to hinder and control us. Dr. Strange Doom says, what is your opinion of Helena Blavatsky? Yeah, I know that she's quite the iconic and sometimes even infamous figure. I like her. I have learned a lot from her. I have learned a lot from Theosophy. The areas I don't agree with her on, I don't think are enough to actually condemn her. I see where she was coming from, even in the areas where I disagree or I diverge. She brought rich, rich perennial wisdom to the West, but in a way where many people did, by the way. But she did it in a way where the integrity of it was preserved. I have a lot of respect and reverence for her. Genji, hi, Sarah. Can you touch base on spiritual warfare? Sure, be more specific. Anna Breslin Gamming. Jesus, no, he doesn't. Oh, I don't think that's for me. Joey Biller, I've heard your message on past lives. Do you recommend regression to deal with dark night of the soul. I've actually not talked about past lives. Oh, I've talked about the doom imprint, if you mean that. Message on past lives. Do you recommend regression? There's issues with everything. A lot of people, especially as an energy healer, want to focus on past lives. My modality doesn't, just because whatever is going on that's the most relevant in a client's life in that moment is exactly what is for their highest good to work on. It's what's the higher self's pointing to and all of that. But that doesn't mean that I'm against past lives or that therapy. I think accumulate as much knowledge in as many directions so that you become fully developed. And so with that, past lives regression is something that I feel like a lot of people have benefited from. And so with that, you know, it's one of those things. But past lives isn't something that I'm totally really invested in, simply because when you get into the higher densities of reality, things become so multidimensional that it gets just a little less congruent and more nonlinear. Rushia, grief. Do you have anything to say about it, especially when there is a lot, and what might be the best way to move, integrate, transmute, or use it? Okay, so when it comes to grief, so for those who don't know, grief is the physiological, emotional, mental experience of loss. So grief equals loss. Dealing with loss is one of those things where it's done with you. What you can only do is open yourself up to entering every stage of it. I remember my best friend died when he was 21 from a very, very, very violent car accident because he loved driving. And what blocked my grieving cycle through that was bargaining. I could not get out of the bargaining stage for the life of me. Even a year later, I was still bargaining. It's useless. You can't bargain. What happened. So what blocks us is what to become aware of, so that it can eventually just go. It needs to go through every stage multiple times. It needs to go through every stage like a washing machine until it cycles out. And so what you can do to move through, integrate grief, is look on the grieving cycle to where you seem to be stuck or blocked, so that then you can accept that part and you could move through that part through allowance. Even if it's not you actively doing something, it's allowing that part to be, whatever stage it's at, and allowing the whole cycle to be, no matter how much it is. A person can spend their entire life in grief, or they could spend a year, or they could spend 2 years, or they could spend 4 months. It really depends on how much they allow themselves to go through the entire cycle. And the less they allow themselves, it could turn into, that's their life. Their life was spent in the grief cycle. Dorothy in Wonderland says, when going through a spiritual awakening, is it normal to want to stop eating food? Wait, these are moving so fast. Sorry. Okay, I know there was another part of that question, but everything, it's all bets are off, you guys. When there's spiritual awakening involved, it's kind of like pregnancy was like, I want a pickle. And so it like nothing makes sense. But yes, you won't want to eat sometimes. That's hormone imbalances. So the endocrine system is intimately linked with spiritual awakening. Even if we're not doing the sacred secretion or not, it really doesn't matter. Like the endocrine system is facilitating all of the shifts, all of the altering that's happening on a physiological level that we call a spiritual awakening. And so because of that, the hormone levels, you know, they're unstable. And so it's one of those things where it's like you won't crave anything. You'll crave lighter foods. You'll crave this, that. There's just a lot of different ways that expresses itself. And one of the main ways is through diet. And even like the food changes. See, the more you go through an awakening, the more you're rising love in the form of ether, but love. And so the more love you have for yourself, you start massively altering all of your choices, but especially around food, because food's the most intimate when it comes to what we put in our bodies and the reflection of if that's self-loving or not. So we start treating ourselves with more self-respect. And then sometimes what's mixed in there is this, it's like this subconscious. It's not happening consciously, but there's this subconscious, like, cease food options. And why we get the craving not to eat at all is because we're actually behind the scenes reconfiguring our diet because we don't actually want the food that we're normally eating. But then that's experienced as not being hungry, just as like temporary phases of the subconscious being rewired during that process. Natalie Rand says, do I have to see anyone from this life after I die? That's just funny. I just said, hold on. Like anyone, you mean like from this life? It depends heavily on a person's belief systems. If a person believes going into the afterlife that they actually have to go through a life review to where they have to heal person to person karma, then, and even if that's something where they don't want to do that, but they still believe that, the dominant belief systems magnetize us to whatever we are, whatever realms we're vibrationally matched to, that we consider the afterlife. And so there's always a balancing that goes on. That's like objective, the universal principles. There's a balancing that goes on, which is called a recalibration process. But whether or not you have to see other people that I'm assuming you mean are from this lifetime during that recalibration process will be entirely dependent on how much needs to be calibrated, how much is left in the emotional body, meaning how much was unprocessed, and what that's magnetizing you towards, as well as your dominant belief systems that are operating not even on a conscious level, on a subconscious level. Let's see. Bear with me. These are moving fast. Oh, somebody had one about Sophia Christ, but I lost it. All right. I don't know if I should even answer the funny ones. Can you speak about Sophia Christ connection? Shed any light on that creation story from what you've learned? So much. That's really a part of esoteric Christianity, mainly Gnostic esoteric Christianity, but even if it's not a vein of Gnostic esoteric Christianity, there's so many different, there's even like alchemical Protestant, like any vein that's tapped in to some sort of form of alternative or esoteric Christianity has some form of creation myth that has to do with Sophia and Yeshua. And so how we can look at that, I'm not saying this is how you should look at it, but a way to conceptualize this is that Sophia is like the wholeness of us, the sanctity. Sanctity means wholeness, the sanctified version of us. Christ is the masculine aspect. And the masculine aspect is the one that is known as the savior, but why it's a savior, it's the deliverer of gnosis. It's the awakener. That's why Christ is a savior. It's the Christ is a masculine energy that awakens us into wisdom so that we can come into wholeness. So they're both extensions of wisdom. They're both, there's the feminine expression of wisdom and then the masculine expression of wisdom. But the whole and the sanctified version of that would be the aeon of wisdom. Aeon in this case, if I'm not going to get too Gnostic about it, would just be the impulse in the universe. Imagine, trying not to get this too like in a spiritual system. Imagine impulses through creation. Imagine thought bubbles that are all us, but that are exploring their own terrain, their own worlds, their own gravity. They're exploring their own impulse, their own will. The aeon of wisdom would be what we call Sophia Christ, but that would be within the larger scheme of reality, the impulse for the wholeness of knowledge. So that's why there's so many creation mix that's mixed in with Sophia and Christ, having specifically to do with the tree of knowledge, good and evil. How do you learn that? Wisdom. So it's always coming back to that theme. That's a good way of explaining an aeon. Let me know if that answered your question, or if you want, if there's a more specific one in there that you'd like me to hone in on. I knew Lucifer questions were going to come in. Trying to see which ones are the most relevant for everyone. Someone asks, can you explain the difference between the higher self and the oversoul? Sometimes there's no difference. It depends on what spiritual system it's referring to. Sometimes there's a difference, and how I perceive it, there is a difference. The higher self would be in closer proximity to us, the individual soul stream. The oversoul would be the one that the higher self is a stream fed into. That's how I see it. Now, in my video about the oversoul and in my video about the higher self, I don't portray it that way because I teach in layers. You can't learn these things in 20 minutes. Just like how it takes a semester in school to fully comprehend even just some topics. But anyways, the higher self, the way I perceive it and connect with it, is closer to proximity to each individual soul. So it could be the it's not incarnated into the ego. It's not incarnated into the individual soul stream. It's the aspect of us that we would consider the witness would be a good way of describing it. If, yeah. So the witness, but it's that higher aspect of ourselves that is our perception, that feeds us life force, that directs our soul stream before we incarnated. And then we come into here, and then we perceptionally lose connection with the spiritual world, but not so. Let me know if you had any more questions specifically about that. What does it mean when ears are popping and ringing from Cosmo Girls? That can be a virus. It could be a virus. But if we're talking about it in a spiritual awakening context, then that is a dominant sign of the third eye opening. So one question that I don't see on here that I thought would for sure come up, because it's still coming up all the time inside my comments of every video, is where do I get my information from? And I just want to let you guys know that I'm not trying to conceal that information. It's in my bio. So you guys can go to my bio of my YouTube channel, and I have it there. I have it on my website. I even made a video called Where Do I Get My Information From? And so I use my background in mysticism as a nice, strong, healthy bridge for my claircognizance. So the answer is I'm claircognizant. And a large percentage of the spiritual community can just accept my claircognizance and that be that. But I want to serve in a way that reaches more than just the choir, so to speak. And so what I use are ways to articulate my gnosis with my healthy and sturdy past in mysticism, because I went through that for a reason. So yeah. Heijin says, can you talk about connection with ancestors? How important is cultural heritage? Ancestors are important, especially since a lot of the cellular debris that is inside our physiology and etheric template are coming from our ancestry. So if you watch my video, how to receive energy upgrades, it was from 2022, so last year. If you watch that one, I talk very briefly about the doom imprint, but I talk about cellular debris and miasms. Cellular debris, specifically miasms, come from our ancestry. So miasms are the physiological distortions of psycho-spiritual imprints. Cellular debris doesn't need to be ancestral. It can be from our own soul's stream, but it's both. So they play a huge role because many of us, many of us came into this reality with the main intention of clearing ancestral debris, which then somehow got misinterpreted into clearing the karma of the world, which is, you don't want to set that. You do not want to resonate with that. That is a false light teaching. The nuance is where the devil lies. You can heal yourself, and that will be broadcasted to our surroundings. But if you mentally resonate with taking on the karma of the world and clearing it, that nuance will shift you into a bad timeline where you're learning harsh karmic lessons and probably in physical pain. Corey says, is Freemason teachings false light too and Christians? This is a great question because Freemasonry has so much rich, valuable, valid knowledge. But yet I don't think they have the whole story. That's what my claircognizance has revealed. So you can exhaust. Okay, it's kind of like how I was talking about the law of one. It's kind of like that with everything. You learn a system, you learn the most from it, you learn the ins and outs of it. But even the ones who talk the highest about, well, this is the Freemason thing for that, and this and this and that, they're all very valuable to know. But also it's really important to understand that Freemasonry doesn't have the whole story. And a lot of Freemasonry, not all of it, a lot of it is very valid. I value Manly P. Hall. He's one rare individual because he chased after source texts. In this age, we don't even know what that means. We're like, source text, that's like, that's like that and Theosophy were the only ones that really cared about preserving source text. But, and he was a Mason, and he spoke about how there was contamination inside the lodges. So even if you were to get a completely uncontaminated Mason, which there are those, they're rare, but there's those. I don't believe their whole system. I believe they have valuable knowledge and a lot of the truth, but I don't believe that system had all of the truth. That's why I hear mixed comments inside my social media platforms where people are either painting them all knowing or completely contaminated. And you guys, it's rarely ever either or. It's usually a mixed bag, which is why nuance is the name of the age. Yeah, Masonic art though. Fire. Okay, Lewis Gardner said something about Jung. If you could find that. What did Carl Jung mean by his front doors message? Called or not called, God is present. So little quick thing about Carl Jung. He had Mason, not just Mason vibes and Mason knowledge. He had a proximity. He himself wasn't a Mason, but his like grandfather was a high Mason. So anyways, called or not called, God is present. I mean, the reason why I brought that up with that question is because if you're coming from a Masonic, even though he did far more, he tied in so many different systems than just Masonic systems, okay? He was a very holistic figure. I have so much respect and reverence for him. So how that paradigm, how he would consider called or not called, God is present, is basically saying that term today that we use in the New Age, which is whether you evolve or not, like evolve or repeat, it would be very parallel to evolve or repeat. And all of them wanted really cool things on their doors because Oracle at Delphi. Phil Plouffe says, do you believe in general we're seeking for answers too much instead of just being? Isn't there suffering in the search? Beautiful question. There's suffering and not in the search. So there's suffering in the search, which is like, will you answer the call? Will you go on the journey? Build your own adventure. And the people who try to deny that are in resented, built up pressure pain. So why not just be in alignment with the assignment? The assignment is this era. How do you know? How do you know this is the assignment? Well, you were put in a time-space reality that has arms and legs, so you have to do things. So there's a time to be, and there is a time to act or seek. And a lot of times people, and I don't think this is coming from you, Phil, I could sense your genuineness, but a lot of times there's this tone. There's this tone with people who want to be like, just be, you know, like whatever, because people are getting too cerebral. And it's a response to the fact that a person is confused and cerebral, so they're hyper in their mind. But that can level out. That will level out. That's a part of the journey. It's recalibrating. You're not always going to have everything perfectly balanced. So usually when a person sees somebody too much in their questions, too much in their seeking, they think the antidote and the medicine is to go straight into like shaming or like stopping that and like just be. But really it's a balance. Like when we're searching and seeking, there are times when it's revved up, when we feel too much of a gap in between that knowing. And no matter how much a person tells them to just be during that, that will just ramp up the anxiety. That's not, if it didn't, then you would see me make multiple videos on how to just be. But the assignment for this era is to heal on multiple levels, seek truth so that we have clarity. And that's why everyone is like, what's going on? I want clarity. How do I see? I'm confused. And so helping a person become sovereign is the way that they can actually start being, because there won't be that unconscious pressure of what the F is going on. Great question again. That is one that really helps bring clarity to a person's journey. Rich Rudy, I've heard you talk a couple times about the importance of minerals. Can you point us in a direction of reputable sources to get good minerals? I don't know if I could say that on here without, I don't know, but let's see. Like, are you talking about brands? Because if you're just talking about brands, I'm a big fan of Premier Research Labs. They're hard to get, though, without going through some sort of practitioner, like a chiropractor or some sort of licensed, alternative medicine doctor. But they happen to sell them at this really luxury market. So I just take a trip to the luxury market to get them. Yeah, I don't know if that answered your question, though. Melissa Newhouse says, I love you and appreciate you. Thank you. I'm curious about the plant kingdom during this ascension process. I'm a gardener by profession and passion, noticing weird changes with certain plants. Yeah, everything's evolving. Everything's evolving, which is also why I'm just going to like tangent for a second, which is why spiritual systems in the past are coming into union and rectification. First, it happened through Manichaeism. Now it's happening through Rosicrucianism. But the reason why I'm highlighting that is because whether it's plants kingdom or whether it's spiritual systems in the past and everything in between, they're all being called. They're all shifting. They're all moving into their next phase. So think of everything. Think of consciousness as intelligence. It wouldn't serve us to be in a static state. Plants and everything else are consciousness and intelligence. I hope that answered your question. I know I like turned it into mysticism, but it's just to make the connections. You guys have no questions about the chosen ones? I did this one for the chosen ones. I got so many questions. Okay, Veronica, I will make a video on Kundalini awakening simply because that's a large topic to chew and you just like explain it. Yeah, I will make a video on that. Thank you. Okay, you guys are funny. Okay. I don't know. What is your opinion on the UFO phenomenon? What is it? Great question. The UFO phenomenon going on right now are total litmus tests. They're like checkpoints for the collective. And they will play out like a build your own adventure. They're like people think that there's like an end game. The end game depends on how conscious we are. It's always being modified. It's always being recalibrated. They're always shifting it depending on us. They won't stick to a cookie cutter plan that was built 10 years ago if they're noticing month to month, year to year, that the collective is changing. So a lot of times people try to like make concepts sound like very solid, very cemented, very like even the reset, like everything depends on how much of our sovereignty we're accessing. Because how much of our sovereignty we're accessing will gauge to them, will tell them, we can't do that. We can't move along with that. We can't have that plan. They're too smart. Their vibration's too high. Blackwood Rose, if you'd like to know who they are, you can watch my video on who are they from last year. So yeah, everything depends on that. But to answer your question directly, the UFO phenomenon, like higher consciousness, civilizations aren't using the technology that what's being presented to us as higher dimensional technology is being used as. So what you have going on, and I didn't invent this term, this is an actual term. You have useful idiots. That's an actual term. I know it's rude, right? Useful idiots is a term when somebody is disseminating information and they believe what the people running the agenda happen, they just perfectly line up. So that person's not getting paid, they're not getting whatever, they're not what, and so they're called a useful idiot because they're like, hey, they're helping spread that concept. That's great. And then you have intentional disinformation. So there's two categories. One's more nascent, innocent than the other. But either way, you have a lot of lack of true information about how higher consciousness technologies, if we could even call it that at that point, because consciousness is integrated so much, is using what we're considering like, oh, wow, those are, UFOs. And then you have with that a lot of people who were traumatized by negative hyperdimensional beings. And so I honor that. And they're a part of the UFO community as well. Not all of them, but a large percentage of them have been so traumatized by their own abductions and their own interactions with negative entities that will confirm that reality, whether it's a negative one or a positive one, that will confirm that paradigm of UFOlogy, which is still valid. It's a reality, but that's not all of the hyperdimensional aspects. That's not all of the paradigm of this reality. And so the way it's being presented to us right now is my issue. The way it's being presented to us right now, trust me, you don't want that timeline to come into fruition. We will be a match to positive stargates, genuine organic stargates, and therefore positive higher density beings when that is beneficial for our growth. And we're in an ascension cycle right now. So that's not hopeless. That's not far away. But the way to get there, that journey, we're going to have to learn discernment and nuance. So guess why I teach this so much? Because it's the alignment with the assignment. I love that rhymes. I didn't even know it rhymed until like right now. I like Billy. I don't know who asked, but I like Billy a lot. I don't have to agree with somebody to like them. And I don't have to agree with somebody to respect them. And I know the difference. And yeah, I'm not saying I respect very few, but I'm just saying that I don't have to fully agree with somebody or be in full 100% alignment with them in order to see their value and to like them. Okay. Please speak on the Hermetic Order of the Golden Dawn and the mystery. Something. Okay, so Golden Dawn is not still a thing. And when it was a thing, how can I be generous? And when it was a thing, it was a shit show. But you learn, you grow, you evolve. Yeah. It had a lot of wisdom mixed in with a lot of drama. And it's, if anything, a highlight of the testament of the fact that this age should be about healing the emotional body. Because no matter how much mysticism we build up, it's fruitless if our emotional body is the age of a 5-year-old. Okay, fine. I'll take the bait. GFL. Not a fan. No, Paula, you're not broken because you're angry. You're just too whole in a broken world. Can you discuss spiritual gatekeeping? Something else. Can you discuss spiritual gatekeeping in relation to the idea of being chosen? Okay, the problem is they're not gatekeeping at all. Oh, you mean like this superior, like I have this and yet. If anything, they're not being discreet enough. Leave some mystery. They're just going around saying I'm chosen. Gatekeep that because it's annoying. By the way, I was made aware that there was somebody by the name of Paul who highly values my work, who's a part of that chosen thing. Paul, I don't know you in this lifetime, but I love you. And my chosen one video was not personal at all. And I know that because I was in the desert, it looked very personal, but I was just yelling because there was wind. So I was trying to talk above the wind. And also, I'm extraordinarily dispassionate about that topic. I know that it sounded like I was super passionate about it, but it runs 0% of my mind. I don't think about the chosen ones. What happened is I always tune into my audience and how I can best serve. And apparently, my audience is aware of that concept and confused and feeding that attention to it. So, yeah, I know it looked like I was completely kind of like invested in that topic, but that was just the message that came through. It was really nothing personal. I'm completely just passionate about it. Yeah. So no questions about Yahweh. That's another reason why I had this. Whatever. What is your opinion on me saying you are love and you are loved in its purest essence? I've never heard that actual thing. I've only heard alignment with the assignment. Kidding. That sounds beautiful. Very beautiful. Yeah, the firmament. Okay, so Yahweh. Yahweh is source when it's fractured into duality. So that's why I keep talking about Yahweh in a negative light, but people are confused because they say, Yahweh's just God. What's your problem? No, not so. Yahweh is a sock puppet on each hand. It's playing the devil and God. So Yahweh is the fragmentation of source. Who are the White Road Brotherhood? Yes, Yahweh is the demiurge. It's one way of looking at it. It's the way I look at it. We're always channeling, whether we know it or not. How do we know the visions or messages received are not from some trickster? Great question. Where's that question? How do we know? Okay, I'll start answering it. Okay. Are not some trickster or dark energy, but from beings of light. How to differentiate? Perfect. You are in alignment with the assignment, which is discernment. You're asking a question about discernment. This is good. It takes practice. Nobody can spare a person from having negative experiences that then they go through and learn from. We can help, which is what I try to do, many others. But how that takes is really becoming intimate with these forces, which is why so many of our life paths are kind of like WTF. There were whole parts of my journey where my nervous system was so fried from WTF that I had to sleep in my living room with the lights on watching cartoons because that's the only thing that would transition me into sleep. Because of trickster energies. They weren't even trickster, actually. They were just straight up, they weren't hiding. So I'm going to assume you already know that there's positive benefits to trickster energies, not the same as archons, not the same as the negative ones, but there's always a difference in expression. Ones that are in their negative expression are what I call archons. I did an amazing talk at this year's Gnostic conference from Aeon Byte. That's the name of their channel. If you want to check out Aeon Byte, Miguel runs it. He's amazing, rich source of knowledge and information on all things Gnostic and even beyond. But yeah, I want a recording of that because it was a great long lecture on how to discern trickster archonic energies. And one of the main way is to know that they're always trying to do something. This is how you know it's a trickster archon, because there's a lot of different hostile forces and they're not all trickster. But how you know that it's a trickster archon energy that you're dealing with is they're tricking or manipulating, they're doing something to try to get you with your own free will to validate their authority. So trickster energies, archonic energies are intimately linked with authority, which is why sovereignty is so important in understanding sovereignty. Because if not, you'll accidentally, which happens all the time, you'll accidentally give away your inner authority. You'll accidentally give away your sovereignty because of some form of manipulation, aka trickery, because that's the main modus of operation of a trickster being, if that helps you discern. Okay, I'm going to take a few more questions. Is Yahweh a fire spirit? He was a god of war. He was a storm warrior god that then snowballed, just like Lilith, snowballed and snowballed, transformed and transformed into Yahweh. But in mysticism, I mean, I'm going to do a video one day on Yahweh, but in mysticism, Yahweh's portrayed as kind of like the demiurge would be the best way of looking at it. In esoteric Christianity, it would be the moon phase of development. Yeah. Watico virus, I saw that question. Yeah, that's archonic energy. That's just a different word from a different lineage, a different paradigm, but it lines up the same. And if it didn't, I wouldn't say that. But that's just, they're synonymous, they're interchangeable terms. Is humanity going to shift and understand the service to others? You can watch my video, The Timeline Split Explained. Because yes, and not everyone. Because it's free will. Elite Shungite for the electromagnetic issues you're having that are now sparking paranormal activity. Elite Shungite. What are your thoughts on the idea of surrendering yourself? Positive or negative? Just like everything else, it depends. If you're surrendering yourself to what is, there's power in that. It's one of those paradoxes that you would see inside the Tao Te Ching. It's relinquish power to be in your power, relinquish your power to gain power. It's one of those. So if you're surrendering, but truly coming from a space of surrender, that's beautiful on so many different levels. If you're surrendering to an entity or a specific what have you, that's when we start needing to understand the context. And that's where things start getting tricky. Okay, Anna Sit had a question. If you could reshare that so I could see it. I'm going to do a video on the 144,000. Don't you worry, Freeman. Got you. Guys have a new set of questions. I see the same ones always inside my comments. And now today, you're like, why does peanut butter and jelly go together? How many months until Antichrist? I'll do a video on Antichrist. Great question. Okay. I'm going to take one more question. And then we're all going to go to bed. We're going to go to sleep. Are spirit guides really demons? It depends. Do you have a limited and paranoid view of the universe? Because the less a person knows, the more scared they get. And I'm not specifically singling you out, but what I notice is that the people who are like talking about J seals, they're like, you don't know sacred geometry's a trap. Or they're like, you don't know spirit guides are demons. They all know very little. And can you hold a conversation with them about anything? Can they shoot the shit? No. They only know one thing, and it's a paranoid thing. I'm actually doing on my own some testing to see, because I don't have J seals. I never did. When I found out about J seals, I was like, which was over a decade ago, I was all on it right away. I was like, how do I get them off? I never had them. And apparently some people never had them on. But I'm now doing my own little experiments and tests to see if sacred geometry really is in a Metatronic reversal. Because I've heard that, and I used to be scared of that well over a decade ago, but just because you learn something that's scary doesn't mean that that's actually true. Just like how if you learn something that's non-scary and feels good, doesn't mean it's automatically true. And what was the question? But yeah, they can't shoot the shit. It's like just daemons. Do you know what a daemon is? Jung, James Hellman, these like magnificent psychological alchemists all knew daemons to be guardian guides, the higher self. But yet you get some people who know daemons to be demons in disguise, and the arrogance of just knowing very little, but amplifying that out into the world. Yeah. So spirit guides. Yeah, it's one of those things where you need to make sure that a guide is an actual guide, but it's quite obvious. It's more obvious with that than with many different things inside spiritual concepts. Many spiritual concepts are far less obvious. So when it comes to a guide presenting itself as a guide, they will never try to put you into fear. That's the first thing. That's just off the bat. They're never going to try to put you into fear, even to the point where they might not take a full-on shape of who they really are, but that's not to trick you or to manipulate you. It's because they're never going to try to put you into fear. The second is they respect your sovereignty. True spirit guides respect your sovereignty. The third is this aspect giving you sleep paralysis or some form of bad vibes? Or what I call shame monster. Does it feed off of your shame? Anything bad vibes related. Yeah, so those are like dominant ways to be able to gauge whether or not a guide is in your field that is truly a spirit guide versus what one might call a trickster entity. I saw a few questions here on the eighth sphere as well. That's another one that I will be doing its own video on, simply because the eighth sphere, very large, very relevant concept for this age. It's a part of the assignment. You guys, I had such a beautiful time connecting with you guys. You're hilarious. You guys are so advanced. I'm honored that you guys are here. I'm honored to be here. Thank you for giving me the most precious thing in all of the universe, which is your attention. Sending you infinite love and gratitude. You guys have a beautiful night.